Welcome to video number 4 in Biblical Basics of Political Theology. In this video, I want to look at a divine paradigm for adjudicating a crime or a divine paradigm for retribution. In the last video, we talked about the state as we experience it in this age as being a post-fall sphere of retribution. It's unlike the church. The church is not a sphere of retribution, but it is a redemptive sphere. And so before we look any further at the state as this retributive sphere, we'll look at 1 Peter 2 and Romans 13 for a moment. I first want to go to Genesis 3 because if it's a post-fall sphere, and it is this retributive state, then we want to look at God's paradigm for retribution as we see it in Genesis 3. So that's what we're going to look at. Genesis 3, everybody knows the story, and in one sense, there's not a whole lot to read here. But if we go to Genesis 3 and we just remember a few of the truths that the Bible teaches us even outside of Genesis 3, God relates to us politically, right? He relates to us as a king, as a lawgiver, as a judge. We are his subjects. Sin is a transgression of the law. It makes us law breakers. And so he has a kingdom, and we are subjects and citizens of the kingdom of darkness until he reclaims us and transfers us into the kingdom of his beloved Son. And in Genesis 3, then, we see a lot of that playing out. So in Genesis 2, with the prohibition of eating from the tree, God functions as a lawgiver. Again, this should transcend, topics of covenants and things of that nature. The simple fact of the matter is God, as the king, as the lawgiver, he tells his subjects, don't eat from this tree. Now, they do. And so at this point, we are reminded that God alone has rights intrinsic to himself. And so God's rights have been violated. There is a violation of divine rights. And that then initiates an investigation. And I think that's how the civil government is supposed to function. I would argue for kind of a sphere sovereignty paradigm that I'll develop in a little bit. But what happens is when God's right is violated, it triggers some action. It triggers God coming in. So we already know what happened. They ate from the tree. But what happens is when there is a rights violation, or really a rights claim, there is a process, and God gives us a divine paradigm for adjudicating crimes. And so we see God knows what happened. We know what happened. But as it plays out, God comes and Adam says, I was naked, so I hid. And so God then asks him, did you eat from the tree? So this is the investigative process. Did you eat from the tree that I commanded you not to eat? That's 3:11. 3:12, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave to me from the tree and I ate. So there's an investigation. There's an accusation, and now we have the eliciting of a confession. Now, this is not a good confession in the sense of when we confess ourselves to be sinners and God to be righteous. No, this is actually bad. He's hiding from God, and he blames the woman and God, right? It was the woman who you gave to me. Everything was fine till you made her and brought her to me. But this elicits a confession. So here, first, God has functioned as a legislator. He has published his law. It is known to Adam, and Adam has communicated it to Eve by the process of kind of delegated authority, right? Hierarchical delegated authority, as we've talked about. So God has first functioned as the legislator. Then he's functioned as the investigator. So he's investigated. He has elicited a confession. Having elicited a confession first from the man, then from the woman, right? The woman, blames the serpent. Then God functions as the judge. He pronounces their guilt, right? Because you've done this, he tells the serpent. And so verse 17, 3:17, he tells Adam, because you've listened to the voice of your wife. So now God functions first as legislator, then investigator. Now we have a confession. Now he functions as the judge. You've done this. You are now guilty. Okay. After functioning as the judge, he issues the verdict, the sentencing, right? Cursed is the ground. And then after, this curse comes about, then God functions to execute the judgment that has been rendered by him as judge, or he carries out the punishment. So he kicks them out of the garden, and then he stations these cherubim with the flaming swords to guard the way back into the garden. So the divine paradigm for adjudicating a crime or for retribution is that you have a legislator that has to publish the law. And then when there's a rights violation, right, God's law is tied to God's character, his rights. And so his rights have been violated. Now there's an investigation. The investigation elicits a confession. On the basis of that confession, there's a judgment that's rendered, a judicial verdict. The verdict has been rendered guilty. Based on the guilty verdict, then the sentencing is declared. You're going to be, kicked out, and the ground is going to be cursed. And then there's the execution of that guilty sentencing. And so they are, in fact, kicked out. That's the divine paradigm, and that sets the stage then for what civil government is to do in this era as a retributive sphere or a retributive institution, this post-fall institution. So we're going to look at that in the next video.